Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today with us, we have Jennifer Elworthy, and Jennifer is a career and fertility coach and expert, and she really helps to support women through one-to-one coaching to help navigate the challenge of balancing their careers with fertility treatment. And she also helps businesses create sustainable fertility policies to attract and retain employees. And I think we'll focus on this and a couple other things today, but I mean, Jen's best place to speak about this. But first, I want to say welcome to the show, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And yeah, no, I think I kind of mentioned a bit about your background there, but I'd love for you to kind of say it in your own words, how you got involved in this space and what it really is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a really horrible year in 2015 where my husband and I sort of decided we were ready to try to have a baby, which seems really naive looking back, that it was just a decision you could make, sort of holding hands, walking around the park, like, oh, we're ready. Because actually it was a much bigger experience and pretty complicated. So as I say, I 2015 was a pretty horrible year. I got pregnant for the first time and felt, excited, nervous, all of those kind of things. Hadn't really heard of miscarriage that much. I'd sort of known people that had had them, but it didn't really occur to me, and I didn't really know much of the details about it. So wasn't really sure about what to watch out for. I started bleeding and I told a friend, and she said, oh, you actually need to go to hospital and kind of get that checked out. Which shows there is a lack of education around this, that as a grown woman, I didn't really realize that that was something you should actually do. I thought it was just something that happened at home. And then went to hospital and they were like, oh, we think it might be an ectopic pregnancy, but we're not sure, but I'm really sorry. There's no heartbeats. It looks like you had a miscarriage. So I kind of went away and it was all sort of very medical, and I didn't really know what the next steps were. But it turns out it was ectopic, and I was monitored for a few weeks, and then I collapsed at home. Was going into hospital that day for some monitoring anyway, so sort of woke up from my faint, and went into hospital, and they said, yeah, it's an ectopic pregnancy. You've got quite a lot of internal bleeding from a ruptured fallopian tube, and I was rushed into emergency surgery to save my life, really. And through all of that, it was sort of forgotten that I'd also lost my baby, and wasn't really sort of dealt with. And I had the surgery, recovered physically within a few weeks, and went back to work and just felt awful. And my confidence was just knocked. And I just, felt really, really crappy that this had happened to me. And I couldn't quite believe that it happened. And I couldn't believe that the world was still turning while that had happened. I then thought, well, I'll get pregnant again and then everything will be okay. Was pregnant within a few months, and had morning sickness and felt very pregnant, all of those kind of things, and then had a miscarriage at about 9 weeks, while still having morning sickness, which is one of the sort of unspoken about things that happen during a miscarriage. So I was given some medication to kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but sort of to complete that miscarriage at home, which didn't work, was incredibly painful. Even things like, I can remember walking along the street and feeling like I was miscarrying again, and I had to sort of hobble home and deal with what was happening then. I ended up then having to go and have surgery to remove the final bits of the baby, and just woke up from that surgery feeling horrific and just sobbing on the nurses in the recovery ward saying, my baby's gone. I then, sorry, I'm getting emotional thinking about it.
No,
I then went on to get pregnant again about 6 months later, and took the pregnancy test, saw I was pregnant, and within a few days just knew it was ectopic. I just had a sense, I had some early bleeding, I had a little bit of pain. I just knew what it was like to have an ectopic pregnancy by then. Went into hospital. They confirmed it was, that they didn't want me to have surgery, wanted to try and preserve my tube. So I spent a night in hospital monitoring, and it didn't rupture very much. So it was okay, and sort of started healing. So I went home. But during that time, I was told that I was kind of almost pleased that I'd had my third miscarriage, because I knew that if you had 3 miscarriages in the UK, that you would be eligible for some investigation about what was happening. But I was told that that one didn't count, that the ectopic pregnancies didn't count.
Oh wow.
That wording was kind of medical and scientific. It's a really, really horrible thing for a woman to hear.
Yeah.
And I was just absolutely floored by the whole experience. I was having really regular panic attacks, struggling to breathe. I couldn't go to any social events. Going to the supermarket was a really big deal. I felt like people were bumping into me all the time. They weren't. And then I had to go to work as well and kind of perform, and it was just so hard. But work had always been such a big deal to me. It had been, something that had brought me confidence, and I knew I was really good at it, and I was on track to the senior levels that I wanted to get to within various businesses. And then all of a sudden I just could barely show up. It was enough to get in the door, let alone manage a team and kind of perform at my best and pitch for budget and brief agencies and things like that.
Yeah.
It's completely impossible. But kind of long story short, I worked with this mentor at the time, Alex, who was fantastic. And she really got me to think about what work meant to me, and that it did give me confidence, and that if I could use it as a distraction to rebuild my confidence and kind of just distract me for a few hours a day from all of the crap that was happening in my personal life, maybe that could be a positive thing. So, it wasn't easy, but I worked really hard at it and went on to be promoted to Director of Marketing Communications during that time, while having IVF treatment as well. And, got full scores in my review and got my full bonus and all of those kind of really good things. And I share that story because it shows that with the right support from the right people in your business and with the right mindset, you can go on to do well at work while going through all of those kind of challenges.
Wow, yeah, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's it's obviously really hard for you to share, and I think that's obviously really important story and journey that I know a lot of people suffer with. As you said, people don't even know about the basic facts with miscarriage, and I think shining a light on that through your story is actually really, really inspiring. So thank you for that. And then, well, how did that kind of lead you to setting up your kind of coaching that you do now? So how did that kind of filter into that?
So I'd got a leadership scholarship with the Marketing Academy years and years before. And I'd experienced coaching for the first time and just absolutely loved it. And I always thought, one day I'll retrain and I'll be a coach. We actually moved to New York when my son was just under a year old, and my visa didn't allow me to work, but I was so kind of like, I can't just be a mum at home. I know I've been through this big journey, but I can't do it. It was so hard being a new mum. I needed something else. I needed to use my brain and all of those kind of things. And I thought, right, this is the time. So I got a babysitter and started my coach training, which took 18 months. And throughout it all, I just had this idea around fertility and work. I wrote all my essays on using coaching techniques to support those women. So yeah, when I graduated with my coaching qualification, I realized that that was what I wanted to do with it. So now I coach those women who are determined to still make work for them in whatever capacity that might be. It might not be that they want to be promoted. It might be that they just want to take a step back. But whatever that is, we figure out a way to stop work and your fertility challenges and treatment clashing and make them kind of work alongside each other. And then I also go into businesses and train them in why and how to be fertility friendly. And so that sort of top down, bottom up approach is, hopefully there will be a meeting in the middle where companies are being supportive and women are able to speak up and say, this is kind of what I need and this is how I'm going to manage my career alongside this.
Yeah, I love that you work from both ends as well, and so that it can kind of help in every way possible. I think that's a really interesting way of doing it as well. If we say start with the top down approach, what would be like something you would initially look for or want to change or think's really important for, say, a business to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing I think is psychological safety. So valuing employees as people and not just as workers, and making sure that they are able to raise things that's happening in their personal life in a safe environment so that they don't feel judged or discriminated against. And there's lots of ways to do that. It's not about having sort of, half day Fridays or all of that kind of fun stuff, which obviously has a benefit, but it's really about just being a trusted employer, a safe space for people to talk about things that are impacting them. And that comes from listening to what your employees want, getting to know them as people beyond the jobs. And that can be a real challenge when we're all, remote working, but it's really important to have that kind of relationship with your employees.
Yeah, and I know we've spoken about this before as well, and I know I've always found it really interesting that like it can be really easy the ways in which this can be done. I think I remember you saying how like mirroring back someone's style of language and style of conversation back to them is just a simple way that you can teach all managers to do, and it can really help people feel a lot safer. So I always found that, yeah, that was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone says miscarriage, use that word. If they say baby loss, or if they say ectopic, don't say miscarriage, say ectopic, when you're ectopic, or things like that. And I think that comes from listening, to really listening what someone's saying, but also there's a sort of safety and a comfort, I think, for line managers or people managers within that if you're just there to listen, that's actually a skill you can master. You don't need to know all the ins and outs of miscarriage and baby loss and fertility treatment, but just listening shows that you're there, and then asking a really simple question like, how can I support you? And that just makes people feel really comforted and really safe, and that they can go through this in their personal life while working.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have to be this transformative policy that's like got a million different parts to it. I think the fact that it can be so easy just makes it simply makes sense to put in place. And then I'd also love to know more about the coaching approach that you do, and that kind of from a coaching perspective, how do you empower the people that you work with to really like take control?
So it's very much kind of career coaching, and we do that through the lens of fertility treatment and challenges. So it's very much about the work that they want to do and their career, but it's also taking into account the fact that they've got this huge thing in their personal life which is impacting them. So there are a lot of kind of safe spaces and supportive networks for people who are going through fertility treatment. But what I think is missing from that is this work thing, because we're at work all the time. It's such a huge piece of our life, and then these two things just kind of clash together like rocks. So it's all about just kind of unpicking what work means to someone, what they really want from work at the moment. So knowing that they can't change what they're going through in their personal life, that the fertility challenges are happening. They may have more miscarriages, they may need to have IVF, or they don't know if IVF will be successful for them. But without taking that away, what could work and the rest of their life be like under those circumstances? And then we make a plan to achieve that and really break it down into steps, really simple steps. And then I'm there to support them, to cheerlead them, to keep them accountable along the way.
Yeah, I love the plan aspect of it as well. I think that can make it, if you break it down, as you say, into different steps, it can seem way less daunting than having to suddenly feel like you've got to you completely get all your confidence back at the click of a switch. I think that's really important.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And coaching is, I remember one of my trainers saying to me, without an action plan, coaching is just a nice conversation. And so coaching really is about really narrowing down on that goal. What do you want to achieve, and breaking that down into manageable steps to really set you up for success.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really interesting. And how do you kind of help people like gain their confidence back? I think that's something it feels kind of intangible almost. So how do you kind of help people feel empowered and to get that confidence?
Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? If you ever have any kind of knocks, or if you're not feeling very confident, you can often really go back to childhood even. There is no magic formula. That's sort of not how coaching works. There is no sort of set steps I can give someone to bring back their confidence. But I think there has to be a belief that they want to rebuild their confidence, that they want to get to a certain point. And I think just making that plan, and moving towards it can actually bring confidence back in its own right.
Yeah.
And so we work on a lot of things like who's in your support team, and what specifically do you need from them? What's the role of your partner in this, if you have a partner? What's the role of your company that you work for, friends,
Yeah.
people at the IVF clinic you meet, the doctors? What specifically you're asking for, and is there anything in that support network that you're missing? And then who do we go to and find for that? And knowing you've got those backers, I think can really help you just sort of, move forward and feel like you are rebuilding yourself.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's so important I think you help people really change work, which can feel like a burden, into more of a distraction, or even an area which gives confidence, as opposed to feeling like it's a burden and something that you're really struggling with. So I think that kind of reframing of what work is to someone is really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of feelings of failure that can come up with
Yeah.
miscarriage or not conceiving. Um, so realizing that isn't all of you is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, we've kind of touched on a few of them there as well, but what would you, for someone listening to this who may be perhaps going through fertility challenges and struggling to balance their work with that, is there any kind of top tips you would give them just to help them along their way?
Yeah, I think the first one is always just to be really kind to yourself. This
Mm,
is such a big and difficult and emotional, physical thing to go through. Um, and just really recognizing that it's okay to not be okay.
yeah.
That this is really, really hard. And it would almost be, I can remember my therapist at the time, I was telling her about how I was feeling, and she said, you are reacting appropriately to what you've been through.
Yeah.
And that was so comforting. I was like, oh, okay, this is a normal thing. That, like,
Mm,
this is how I should feel. That's okay. It's
yeah.
not that I should just be able to get on with it, and I should be able to function at work, and I should be able to go to the parties. It was okay that I was feeling like that.
Mm,
So I think really recognizing the situation that you're in. And one of the things that I have to be very careful on when I'm coaching and when I'm talking to prospective clients is that I only coach people who are coachable. So if they're very much in the space of not being able to even think about a goal
mm,
and an outcome, then it's not the right time to work together. But the people that do work with me, they'll really have a clear idea, or they'll have an idea, and we'll flesh that
mm,
out, how to sort of rebuild themselves and how to make work. It
mm,
could be that we need to speak to their managers about it, and we can talk through some techniques and some ways in which those conversations can be really productive. We can talk through things like your schedule and the logistics around it. And then one of the really big things that I like to work on with clients is I call it bounce back ability. So how do they work on their resilience? So how do they top themselves up so that if a knock happens, they're not quite so flawed by it?
mm.
I did loads of really random craft courses, like mosaic courses and stuff like that, because
Uh-huh.
pottery thing, because it was just a way for me to just have a really lovely experience and
Yeah.
feel like I was making something, and my hands were busy and my brain wasn't thinking about all the sad stuff.
Yeah.
And then when knocks came, I was just a little bit stronger. I'm not
Mm.
saying, going and making a mosaic table is going to fix everything, but just those kind of mindful distraction is just
Yeah.
so helpful.
Mm. And I think that's a really good piece of advice. And I also think what you do in normalizing the conversations about it are so important as well, because so much of the time fertility struggles are just kept hush hush and you're expected to just carry on as normal. But I think empowering people to not just speak to yourself, but also speak to their managers and say, okay, look, I need this, I need that, and I need to accommodate me and make me the best worker for you
Mm.
guys as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes my clients don't want to tell their
Yeah.
managers, and that's okay too. I was talking to a client this morning actually, and she was saying, how much should I tell them? I don't know what I want to tell them. And it's such a private, personal thing. You don't have to tell
Mm.
them anything. But I do believe that opening up the conversation in some way can help to get that support that you might need.
Yeah, completely. And I think, how do you, how would you kind of recommend companies can make themselves extra fertility friendly and make sure these conversations are normalized?
Well, I think it's that psychological safety to start
Yeah.
with, listening, as we've talked about. So my kind of top things would
Mm.
be to have that kind of culture where you're
Yeah.
listening to your employees and valuing them. To educate, so bringing someone like me in to talk about the why and the how to be fertility friendly,
Mm.
and really opening that up to everyone, that this isn't a women's issue, this affects everyone.
Yeah.
Um, Male infertility is also a really big thing. I only work with women really in my coaching practice, but of course men in the business training. But also, you never know when this might affect you. Maybe there's someone whose daughter is going through it at the moment, or
Mm.
maybe there's someone who their friend is going through it. It's just all really, really helpful, or it might affect them in the future. So really making sure it's a people policy, not a women's policy, is really, really key. Um, and then also sort of signposting support. So making sure that
Mm.
everyone knows where they can go for help. Is there a fertility advocacy group? Is there one person that you can go and talk to who's been through something similar and can help? It
Mm.
doesn't have to be HR. But having really clear policies as well. I would suggest people have a standalone fertility policy
Yeah.
that isn't, part of a sort of maternity or women's policy, but is
Yeah.
very much fertility focused. And then, if you can pay for treatment through private healthcare, then I think that's an amazing, wonderful thing to be doing. But it's got to start with all of that sort of safety and
Mm.
listening first. Otherwise, it is just money.
Yeah, completely. It's that creation of a culture, isn't it? Which is so
Yeah.
important. That's so interesting. And I think, I imagine there's people listening to this that are interested in what your coaching perhaps looks like. So how would you say, what would be a typical timeline, or how would it typically work?
I have a couple of coaching packages.
Mm.
So the first one is climb off the fertility hamster wheel, which is, people always talk to me about this kind of just being stuck in the hamster wheel of like IVF and fertility, and
Mm.
trying to manage everything, and you're just spinning constantly and can't get any clarity. So this is a 90-minute session where we just talk through one of the biggest things that you're facing and really move you forward with that. Get rid of anything that's stopping you moving forward, anything that's
Yeah.
stopping you achieving your goals. And then we do a couple of accountability catch-ups as well. So that's like if there's a really pressing problem. And I created that one because a lot of women were saying to me, I really want to work with you, but I can't do the 3-month package. I need an answer now. So
Yeah.
it's a kind of thing. And then I have a longer one, which is more around like long term. What do you want from your career? How can we have these conversations with line managers?
Mm-hmm.
How can you build that support network? How can you work on your resilience and bounce back ability? And that's a 3-month package.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. And I'll obviously link all of that below. And I think, yeah, I would encourage people to have a look over at your page and your Instagram, and you're always posting really interesting things, which I think are so important. And I think that kind of brings me to the end of my questions in general. But I wondered if there was anything else that you wanted to add at all, anything else that you wanted to say.
Just, I think everyone should be really kind to themselves in this situation. It's
Mm.
really, really hard, and seek help from the right people.
Definitely. I think you brought up so many key messages with regards to listening, access, and just being kind. And I think it's quite easy to forget that when you're going through something that's such a struggle. You can really just narrow in on that one thing, and it can be all consuming, as you mentioned yourself. So yeah, I want to say thank you so much for helping people realize that there can be light at the end of the tunnel. And also thank you so much for sharing your story as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.